Donald Trump's speech in Aurora, Colorado, begins with a powerful display of patriotism, a hallmark of his public addresses. By choosing to open with the song God Bless the USA, he immediately sets an emotional tone, connecting with his audience on a deep, nationalistic level. The song itself evokes pride in the American identity and often serves as a rallying cry in his speeches. Trump refers to the audience as proud American patriots and expresses gratitude for their support, reinforcing the idea that they are united in a common mission to save the country. This sense of belonging is critical to his rhetorical strategy. In my opinion, Trump's invocation of patriotism is a key tool in building emotional connections with his audience. However, it's important to note that while this approach is powerful, it often bypasses deeper, more substantive discussions about actual policy. Patriotism here becomes a catch-all theme that rallies the base, but doesn't necessarily delve into how these values translate into concrete actions or solutions for the nation's problems. Trump then shifts to mention recent natural disasters, including hurricanes that hit states like Florida, Georgia, and Virginia. He expresses sympathy and assures the affected people that his thoughts and prayers are with them. This moment of empathy helps soften his image, showing that he is aware of the struggles of ordinary Americans. While this acknowledgement of disasters may seem brief, it sets up Trump as a leader who is connected to real-world issues, even as he prepares to launch into a more aggressive critique of his political opponents. However, from my perspective, these empathetic mentions can sometimes feel like preambles rather than core parts of his message. They humanize him, but they are not followed up with much in the way of policy ideas on how his administration would handle such crises differently than the current one. In many cases, these natural disasters become symbolic of broader failings of the government, which Trump uses to segue into his main critiques. Critique of political opponents, Biden, Harris, and the Democratic administration. Once Trump establishes his connection with the audience through patriotism and shared values, he moves to the core of his message, attacking his political rivals. He quickly begins targeting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, characterizing them as the main culprits for America's perceived decline. In his usual style, Trump uses sharp, almost mocking language to diminish Harris, calling her unqualified and clueless. He specifically focuses on an incident where she used a teleprompter during a town hall, suggesting that this reflects her inability to think or speak for herself. For Trump, the idea of using a teleprompter is an indication of weakness or inauthenticity, something he contrasts with his own ability to speak freely and from the heart. From a rhetorical standpoint, this attack is meant to emphasize Trump's perceived authenticity and strength in comparison to Harris, whom he paints as overly dependent on scripted messages. However, it's worth noting that while the use of a teleprompter might be considered a minor issue in the grand scheme of politics, Trump's supporters often view this as a key difference between strong and weak leadership. This emphasis on authenticity versus preparation plays into Trump's broader strategy of depicting himself as a relatable figure who doesn't need carefully crafted political messages, while his opponents are portrayed as disconnected elites. Trump then transitions into one of the most prominent themes of his speech, immigration. He presents a dire and somewhat apocalyptic vision of the state of the country, focusing on what he describes as an invasion of illegal immigrants. According to Trump, under Biden and Harris, the U.S. has become overrun with migrants, many of whom he characterizes as dangerous criminals, gang members, and the worst people from other countries. Specifically, he mentions the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, claiming that they have infiltrated the community in Aurora and are responsible for multiple violent crimes, including murders and armed assaults. He accuses the current administration of essentially importing this crime by not securing the borders. In my view, Trump's portrayal of immigration as an invasion is a deliberate attempt to tap into fears and anxieties about crime and national security. By focusing on extreme cases, violent gangs, murders, armed raids, he paints immigration in the most negative light possible. This strategy resonates deeply with certain voters who feel that their communities are being threatened by unchecked immigration. However, it's important to recognize that this narrative simplifies a complex issue. Immigration is not inherently linked to crime, and many studies show that immigrants, including undocumented ones, commit crimes at lower rates than native-born citizens. Yet, by highlighting extreme cases, Trump is able to create a perception of widespread danger that bolsters his argument for stricter immigration controls. America First and promises of strong leadership. A central pillar of Trump's speech is his ongoing commitment to the America First agenda. He reminds the audience that under his leadership, the U.S. had the safest border in history, and that the immigration crisis only began when Biden took office. He speaks nostalgically of the border security policies he implemented, such as Remain in Mexico, which he argues kept the country safe by vetting everyone who attempted to enter the U.S. Trump then contrasts this with the policies of the current administration, which he claims have opened the borders to criminals and dangerous elements. He goes further to accuse foreign governments, particularly in Latin America, of intentionally sending their worst criminals to the U.S. to rid their own countries of crime. This part of the speech is filled with vivid imagery of gangs with military-grade weapons, violent crime, and a country in chaos. Trump repeatedly emphasizes that these dangers are not distant but are already here in cities like Aurora, making it a personal issue for his audience. He assures them that under his leadership, the borders will be sealed, criminals will be deported, and order will be restored. While Trump's language here is designed to project strength and certainty, it also reflects a deeply authoritarian approach to governance. His solution to crime and immigration is almost entirely based on force, sealing borders, deporting criminals, and increasing law enforcement powers. There is little discussion of more nuanced or long-term solutions, such as addressing the root causes of migration, poverty, violence, and instability in migrants' home countries, or reforming the immigration system to create a more efficient legal pathway. In my view, while Trump's strongman approach appeals to those who crave immediate action, it overlooks the complexity of these issues, which require not just force, but diplomacy, economic aid, and legal reform. Populism, weak leaders, and the media. Another recurring theme in Trump's speech is his disdain for weak leadership, particularly among Democrats. He singles out Colorado Governor Jared Polis, calling him ineffective and cowardly for not standing up to Biden's administration. Trump often uses this type of rhetoric to cast himself as the only strong, capable leader who can protect Americans, while portraying Democrats as either too naive or too weak to do the job. He mocks Polis, recalling a time when Polis allegedly showed deference to him in the White House, only to criticize him afterward. This anecdote is meant to highlight what Trump sees as hypocrisy or cowardice among his political adversaries. In this section, Trump also renews his attack on the media, calling them crooked and accusing them of covering up the failures of the Biden administration. He frequently returns to this point, blaming the media for bias and dishonesty. In this speech, he even accuses major networks of intentionally editing interviews with Harris and Biden to make them look better. For Trump, the media is not just biased, but actively working against him and his supporters. From my perspective, Trump's attacks on the media serve several purposes. First, they reinforce the idea that he and his supporters are outsiders, battling a corrupt establishment that includes not only politicians, but also the press. This creates a sense of solidarity among his base, who feel that they are being unfairly maligned by both the political and media elite. Second, by discrediting the media, Trump preemptively undermines any negative coverage he might receive, framing it as part of a larger conspiracy against him. This tactic can be effective in maintaining loyalty among his supporters, as it encourages them to distrust any criticism of Trump that comes from mainstream sources. The vision for America's future, Liberation Day, and national restoration. Toward the end of his speech, Trump turns to the future, casting the 2024 election as a pivotal moment in American history. He refers to Election Day as Liberation Day, a term loaded with symbolism, suggesting that the U.S. is currently under siege by a corrupt government, and only his victory can free the country from its current state of decline. Trump promises that his return to power will bring a swift and dramatic restoration of law and order, economic prosperity, and national pride. He pledges to rescue towns like Aurora from the chaos and violence that he claims has overtaken them under the Biden administration. Trump's vision is one of a nation on the brink of collapse, but with him at the helm, it can be pulled back from the edge and restored to greatness. He paints a picture of his first day back in office, where he would immediately close the borders, deport criminals, and reverse every harmful policy that Biden and Harris have implemented. From a political standpoint, this part of the speech is extremely effective in rallying Trump's base. It offers a clear, binary choice: chaos under the Democrats or order under Trump. However, this vision of instant national restoration is somewhat oversimplified. The issues Trump promises to fix, immigration, crime, economic instability, are deeply entrenched and require more than quick executive actions to solve. Governing involves compromises, collaboration, and long-term strategies, something that is often missing in Trump's rhetoric.
Usually it's the opposite. It's usually the opposite. Thank you very much. But you see that arrow in the bottom?
In conclusion, Trump's speech in Aurora is a masterclass in populist rhetoric, combining patriotism, fear, and a strongman vision of leadership. He effectively plays to the emotions of his audience, framing himself as the only person capable of saving America from both external threats, immigration, crime, and internal corruption, weak Democratic leadership, and the media. His message is one of urgency and action, but it often simplifies complex issues and offers solutions that focus primarily on strength and force. While this resonates deeply with his supporters, it also raises questions about the long-term viability of such an approach in addressing the nation's most pressing problems.
Kamala. And my message, they were released and they killed people, a lot of people. They were released.